Good morning. I'd like to call this fifth meeting of the House Standing Committee on Postsecondary Education to order. I'd like to ask all of our members and our guests to please silence your cell phones. In the event it's needed, we did have an overflow room prepared. That room is 131. Looks like we're good for the time being. I want to remind everybody that there are no signs are allowed in the committee rooms. If you wish to speak, there is a sign-up sheet back by the podium. Testimony is at my discretion based on time restraints and information already presented. I'm going to ask the audience, please have no disruptions during the meeting. Due to time constraints, we have other members who have other committees they have to be at 9 o'clock. At 8:55, we will take a vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representative Baker.
Here.
Representative Banta.
Present.
Representative Bratcher. Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Decker.
Yes. Here.
Representative Doan.
Present.
Representative Grossel. Representative Massaroni. Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Payne. Representative Rorks.
Here.
Representative Stalker.
Present.
Representative Thompson.
Here.
Representative Truitt.
Here.
Representative Wilner.
Here.
Chair Tipton.
Chair is here. First item on our agenda today is House Bill 4, an act relating to post-secondary education. If Representative Decker and any guests she has will please go to the table. Going to ask everyone to please identify yourself for the record, and then I will swear you in, and then we will begin the process.
Sliding out. Hello, my name is Jennifer Decker, State Representative from House District 58.
Michael Frazier, Executive Director of the Kentucky Student Rights Coalition, here in my personal capacity.
My name is Joe Bilby. I'm the Deputy General Counsel in the Office of the Speaker.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
All right. Representative Decker, before you begin, members, there is a committee sub in your packet.
Motion on sub.
We have a motion to sub on the sub. For clarity, I want to go over real briefly what is in the sub that is different than the original bill. On page 4 of the sub, lines 20 for 22, there is a definition of the word indoctrinate. On page 10 of the sub, starting in line 6, there is some language that corresponds with page 11 of the original bill. After the language on the Attorney General, there was language in the original bill on a private right of action and also on immunity. That language has been stricken from the bill. There has been additional language added to the bill on page 2, line 6. I want to briefly explain this to everyone. Again, the private right of action is stricken, but beginning on page 6 of the sub, down through page 21 on page 10 of the committee sub. In summary, this would allow the Auditor of Public Accounts to set up a process to review whether or not institutions are abiding by the statute that's provided in the bill, and they have to do that once every 4 years. If the auditor determines that there is issue at one of our institutions, they will notify the institution. The institution will have 180 days to cure that issue. If the institution fails to cure the violation, within that time, the institution shall be ineligible to receive formula funding increases pursuant to KRS 164.092 during the following fiscal year. There's also an ability for the institution to petition the Attorney General if they disagree with the findings of the auditor on the issue. So that is that section. On page 19, lines 19 and 20, there was language that was struck, and additional language that was added to align with section, I think it's section 2J. So those statutes just align. On page 40, starting on line 9, there is a new section. Section 13 has been added to the bill. Again, that starts on line 9 of the sub, goes down through line 19. Basically, this is a section that will say that a licensing authority, and this is an issue that we heard about, some concerns about, a licensing authority shall not require diversity, equity, inclusion training as a prerequisite for initial or renewal of licensing, and some language that goes along with that. On page 41, lines 10 through 14, there are some definitions that go along with that. And that, in essence, is what is in the committee sub. Anybody have any questions on the committee sub? If not, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? No. Committee sub is adopted. Representative Decker, the floor is yours. House Bill 4 for the committee sub 2 is adopted for you to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Today, I ask for your support for House Bill 4, a bill that would ensure that our post-secondary system in Kentucky is held accountable to dismantle the failed and misguided DEI bureaucracies that have made our colleges more divided, more expensive, and less tolerant. If education is to be the great equalizer in the Commonwealth, the opportunity to obtain a college degree in our state must be equally available and affordable to all. House Bill 4 would allow our universities and colleges to return to their primary focus of providing Kentucky students with excellence in academic instruction in an environment that fosters critical thinking through constructive dialogue. To accomplish these goals, House Bill 4 narrowly defines and targets DEI offices and initiatives that promote unconstitutional differential treatment based on religion, race, sex, color, or national origin. DEI policies have cost Kentucky taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars over the past 14 years, a period which Kentucky campuses have also experienced a dramatic drop in overall enrollment of students and a dramatic, deep loss in the enrollment of low-income students. I have never said that DEI is the cause of that drop, but the truth is DEI was meant to improve it, especially for minority students, and it has failed. In 2019, when the Kentucky Council of Postsecondary Education created the first statewide DEI plan, Kentucky taxpayers were promised that DEI would benefit Kentucky's historically underrepresented minorities, including low-income populations. While there has been a slight increase in total underrepresented minorities, a slight increase since 2011, that increase is due primarily to the enrollment of out-of-state students who are not from low-income families and who have received the highest institutional spending of all students from universities and therefore from taxpayers. Data published by CPE shows that enrollment among Kentucky's low-income, underrepresented minorities has significantly declined since 2011, and overall enrollment of our schools has dropped by tens of thousands. When combined with the enrollment loss CPE reports for all of Kentucky's low-income students, low-income enrollment for minorities has also dropped for in-state students dramatically. It is quite simply astonishing to me that proponents of diversity still advocate for a system, a DEI system on our campuses that has failed. based on the enrollment numbers. Our campuses are less diverse. Fewer people are included than before. Critics misread this bill as threatening student centers and threatening support for veterans, first generation, and low-income students, services that are explicitly and groups that are explicitly exempted from this bill. This bill solely ends unconstitutional discrimination based on race, sex, national origin, and religion. After the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2023 in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, it is clear, no longer questioned, that race-based preferences violate the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act. In that opinion, the court said eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. The Supreme Court has explicitly rejected many other proposed social engineering models in the interest of diversity. The court has repeatedly ruled that remedying past social discrimination does not justify race-conscious government action. The court has also rejected maintaining race and sex balance, correcting the underrepresentation of minorities, providing faculty role models for students, increasing the number of minority physicians in underserved areas in a profession, and making the objective of increasing suppliers of diversity. All have been rejected. Taxpayers should no longer be forced to fund such practices, however well-intended. Historically, America has strived for equal opportunity, not subjective equity, which DEI now pursues through discriminatory admissions, hiring, and scholarships. Equity is a standard that will shift with the administration's whims. It will be a goal for whatever group is in power. HB 4 halts this dangerous, unconstitutional approach, aligning Kentucky with equal protection principles. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I appreciate this opportunity to be here today to testify on HB 4 and the end of DEI in post-secondary institutions. But I want to be clear about what this bill is, as the good lady from Shelby County has already said. While this bill has the moniker of an end of DEI bill, this is an equal protection bill. It is a bill to protect individuals from discrimination on the basis of race, sex, national origin, and discrimination, and sex being encompassing to that of the Bostock versus Clayton definition, which includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as well. So when we look at the purposes of DEI, and while many of you all know me here as a student rights advocate, I think it's questionable as that why me as an LGBT advocate as well is also here on a DEI bill. And I think that's a fair question. And before I became a student rights advocate, it's little known to many that at the University of Kentucky, I was the one that also advocated for non-discrimination at the University of Kentucky in its non-discrimination clause, including changing the university's hiring policies, including on its medical campus, helped to secure a center to protect queer Kentuckians, built an endowment, and then also ensure that students on campus had food when they were dealing with housing insecurity and food insecurity. And in part of that, Dr. Eli Capilouto nominated me to be part of the Equal Opportunity Committee at the University of Kentucky, and then also at the time at the rise of DEI, as part of the University of Kentucky's first DEI committee in 2015. So my experiences has been at the foundation of DEI in Kentucky, because what we're talking here, as the good lady from Shelby County has said, we're not talking about the equal protection offices on campuses such as Title IX, Title III, which is disability, Title VI, and Title VII. We're not talking about those offices that are charged to prevent discrimination and also bring accountability. No, because DEI is something different. And indeed, in Kentucky, in post-secondary education, in our history in post-secondary education, a little-known fact that Kentucky's institutions were considered non-integrated until 2009. But once 2009 hit and our institutions were released and our racial equality and metrics were charged and met by our contract with OCR, with the Department of Education, Kentucky lost its compelling state interest, its strict scrutiny, to do social engineering under affirmative action here. So, and under strict scrutiny, which is a strict test with with its facts being fatal, to give you an idea, to meet strict scrutiny, Pearl Harbor wasn't good enough reason to meet strict scrutiny back in the day. I highly doubt that once we have met our obligation for equality, especially by the Department of Education, that we can continue affirmative action post-2009, and we couldn't. But these offices, DEI offices in particular, became different. They became different from those offices of accountability. They became preferential. Preferential in nature by trying to do social engineering on campuses. That's the one half, and that's the half that mostly was instituted by our Council on Post-Secondary Education under KRS 164.092, and then also promulgated underneath Administrative Regulation 13 KAR 2.2160, which became Kentucky's DEI plan. The other half became a form of censorship. Censorship in trying to discredit and also promulgate campus policies of bias incident response team to label speech as hateful or hurtful or traumatic, to shut down protests, not only just for words that we may disagree with, but at the University of Kentucky in 2020, even shut down protests on campus calling for racial equality. This also happened at the University of Kentucky in 2015, in my experience there. So when we take a combination of not only just affirmative action, also preferential treatment, which you cannot have preferential treatment without prejudicial treatment in discrimination law, we're also talking about censorship as well. So we have two forms of DEI promulgated here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and that's what we're talking about. Now, most importantly, because we never want any student to go on our campus facing discrimination on the basis of their sex, race, national origins, or their viewpoint either. Our university campuses should be a marketplace of ideas and a hodgepodge for those around the Commonwealth to come together. And I can't help the national conversation, but when we talk about DEI here, I'm talking about these specific policies. And unfortunately, by these policies, DEI did not include everyone, and they weren't for everyone. By promulgation of these policies, the Commonwealth of Kentucky and our post-secondary institutions have likely discriminated against Asian students because they are intentionally included due to the population set here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. DEI does not include queer Kentuckians. Queer Kentuckians specifically, that was a policy that was set as optional on most campuses, that benefits were not conferred. So the problem with this is that when we allow government to pick and choose which diversity counts, we automatically discriminate. And unfortunately, here in Kentucky, in our DEI programs have done that. And what has been the result? What has been the result of Kentucky's DEI programs after one school spending $32,800,000 per year on DEI programs? Well, the numbers don't lie. Since the Institute of DEI in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we have seen a total of We have seen a total of 36.96% decrease of low-income black students. We have seen a total of 46.76% of all low-income decreases in DEI. In fact, if we dismantled DEI and the departments at one institution, we could afford a $5,466 scholarship to every low-income black student we have lost in enrollment in Kentucky. These numbers are astounding. And when we look at the DEI programs here in Kentucky, it also loses intersectionality. So when you look at the processes, the courts, and what we can do under the Equal Protection Clause of the Civil Rights Act, it is clear. The constitutional command is clear. Eliminating discrimination means the elimination of all of it, including preferential and prejudicial treatment. That's what this bill does, and the courts are clear. Kentucky has to fall in line too. Thank you.
We have any questions from the members? Okay, we have a motion. Second. Representative Dahl. I believe Representative Wilner was the first hand I saw up. Got Stalker in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have so many questions. I'm trying to figure out how to focus. I guess for starters, if I get to ask more than one, we're directly blaming diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on the drop in underserved student bodies. That's really a leap to imply or to assume causation, that this directly caused this. And if the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are leaving some folks out, why don't we make these more inclusive rather than get rid of them? So it just seemed like a very broad leap, and I would love to hear some justification for that.
I touched on this in my opening statement. I've never said it caused it. The only people who say that are those who question why we don't keep it, because it may not have caused it. That's what astonishes me. In my household, if I were paying, certainly not hundreds of millions, but a large amount for something to help something not happen, and then it happened for 14 years, I would stop that spending. I would be disgusted by the outcomes that I was not getting from what I was paying for. But opponents of DEI seem satisfied and say, let's just keep paying for it. Let's work harder at it, even though it fails for 14 years. So I've never said that it caused it. I think there are many factors. I think the cost of it does make it less affordable for students to come.
Representative, if I may, there's also a point here to say that, you are right. As a scientist, correlation doesn't equal causation, right? But in Kentucky, we literally had a correlation within the DEI metrics. Now, we're not talking about the student centers. The centers like MLK at the University of Kentucky ran by Jamal McDaniel, or the LGBT Center ran by Glenn Means, or in her drag name, Petty Pussy, has probably actually created a cultural environment that has led to retention on campuses. However, in Kentucky, we have had direct metrics, DEI metrics, that were supposed to lead to enrollment increases, and that was under KRS 164.092 and promulgated underneath Administrative Regulation 13.2.160. So we literally had the correlation that was supposed to equal the causation of enrollment, because enrollment in higher education, as indicated by the performance reports of the Council on Postsecondary Education, is our leading metric for higher education performance, because you can't get the kids to retain or graduate if you can't get their butts in the seats in the first place.
Mr. Chairman,
so we had specific race-based metrics in those performance.
I would like to make
Go ahead,
one more
Representative
point. This question about whether the DEI that is banned by this bill, which is preferences and prejudicial treatment, that is no longer debatable about whether it's a good thing to do, a bad thing to do, will it help, will it not? It is unconstitutional, says the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So to now sit and wonder, could we do it better? It is unconstitutional. What we have included in this bill is declared unconstitutional.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
We have so many people who want to speak today. I'm going to limit everybody to one question.
Thank you.
Representative Stalker.
Thank you, Chair. Questions and comments. So I guess what I want to better understand, first of all, I think I understand what you said, Rep. Decker. You said that you did not say that this caused it, but your counterpart to your right said the exact same thing, that this is exactly why low-income students, that we're seeing a decline in their enrollment. So I think that was pretty explicitly said. So I think we just need to be mindful of what we're saying and then not backtracking. But I think it's disingenuous to say that that these efforts are not working when you think about years and years and years, decades, that universities have not been inclusive environments to many populations of people of color, women, our LGBTQ community, indigenous people, so many people who've been excluded from higher education. And to say that we've been trying this for, a few years and it's not working, well, we have many, many, many years that we have to go back and try to undo a lot of years of damage where we have excluded individuals. I also don't understand, these efforts were put in place to close achievement gaps, to make these environments more comfortable and inclusive and inviting for students to come, to flourish, to get an education, to connect with people who come from different backgrounds than they may, and to learn. And that's a great place to do that. If we are removing these efforts with no proof that I can see, that I'm not clear of any proof that you are bringing, nor am I convinced that it is correct. My question is what are we replacing it with? Because the achievement gaps will still persist. They will, in fact, only increase. And what I'm also afraid of is that we will continue to suffer as a state with an ongoing brain drain. I worry about the students that are sitting in this audience who I do not think are in favor of this bill. I do not see this room packed with students that are saying, I am being discriminated against on any of these bases that you are claiming, that they will leave our universities because they cannot get the type of education that they need to be successful in the real world. And so they will not stay in this bubble of a state where people are trying to make diversity, equity, and inclusion, those words, a bad word by reducing it down to an acronym. So if you could answer, what are we replacing this with, and what proof you have, data, I'd be really curious.
I made the announcement at the beginning of the meeting there would be no disruptions. This is your last warning. If this happens again, I'll have security clear the room.
The data supplied by the universities themselves show this cataclysmic decline. It is from the universities. It is readily available. And I think as overseers, we should be aware of that. We all should know that. You can manipulate it, and you can see the loss of enrollment for all students, and then you can see the loss of enrollment for underrepresented students of low income in our state. Our state underrepresented minority students have not felt that the DEI did what you suggest it does, makes everyone feel welcome, is inclusive to all. They don't come to our campuses.
It might be because they are working too, right? Isn't that fair?
And
Representative
also,
Stalker, any additional comments or questions? This is not a debate.
Sorry.
Need to be directed through the chair.
this is not something Kentucky will be doing alone. The entire nation is under federal order to disband these offices. We won't be an island unto ourselves. And what will replace this is actually the freedom and equality of opportunity for all. We won't be picking and choosing who gets enrolled, who gets scholarships based on race, sex, religion, national origin. It will be the same for all. There is a very interesting book I would recommend that all of you who support DEI read. It's called Place, Not Race. It's written by a social justice warrior who says DEI has damaged the minority community. It has created hostility, it has created resentment, and it has been spent exactly as Kentucky has spent it on out-of-state students who are, I guess, better prepared in their eyes to graduate. So our low-income students, and that's who you represent, our low-income minorities are not on our campuses to the extent they were before all this started. What's to blame? I don't know. This hasn't helped. And if I were an advocate for the minority community, which I am, this is damaging to the minority community. So says the author of Place Not Race.
And Representative, you're absolutely right. We cannot just there is discrimination in this world. There's evil, there's hate in this world. That is true, that's undeniable. And unfortunately, the policies that we see isn't helping the student that's trying to get 2 meals at King Solomon on the west end of Louisville, or the kid who has a parent in jail in Allison County, Kentucky. So we can't just go in and bury our hands to the sand in things that aren't working and say, well, that's just it. So, and again, as the good lady from Shelby has said, we have seen systematically from the NIH to national granting programs move a shift from not race, but place, social economic place, as a better indicator. And in fact, that's what we have been doing, and we have been seeing the Council on Post-Secondary Education doing, is to move from an unconstitutional regard to a more constitutional and scientific regard of addressing social economic place. So this is where you're seeing updates, particularly in some of the statutes and administrative regulations that we have seen, that we are getting back into the intersectionality of poor Kentuckians, which DEI has completely failed in this state. So there is stuff being done, and I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited for Dr. Aaron Thompson to take this lead on it, because when you also read his research as a sociologist first, this actually gets more to the heart of his research. So I'm excited to see students from the West End to the hollers of Pikeville to rise up and be able to support it with this policy based upon socioeconomic place, which seems to be the better indicator in higher education.
Our next question is from Representative Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to highlight the fact that I think House Bill 4 is both impractical and overreaching. I think it opens our universities up to frivolous lawsuits. It's a very quick turnaround time to June to put all this into action. It's overreaching in the way of our licensure boards, who have set out what they think should be the criterion for licensure, and now we're coming in and telling them what they cannot include when it's an important piece of their licensure process. I also think it's important to note that college students are mostly adult students. They're student learners who have chosen and are paying money to go to a certain university, to get a certain curriculum, to get a certain degree. You know ahead of time what you're signing up for. If you wanted to go to a different university where things were different, then you could have chosen that. I think it's important to note, a piece of personal, point of personal privilege today to say that when I went to the University of Louisville, I chose my degree path. I chose how I was going to pay for it. And it was probably the first time in my life, having grown up in private Catholic education, where I finally got to be around people who didn't look like me, didn't grow up the same way as me, had different religions, and had different backgrounds and lived experiences, and actually challenged the way of thinking that I had always grown up in. And I don't think that we get that result without being presented information that differs from our own opinions and backgrounds. I get really confused as when we use language like subject for inquiry and viewpoint neutrality, when one could say that any opinion isn't neutral. But I'm not sure how you are to learn what you do actually believe without being presented something that you do not believe. And so honestly, today I kind of think this might actually be an exercise in subject for inquiry. I think that while the chairman did mention that this is not a debate, I do think what we do here in the legislature is debate, and it is important to have these conversations and to disagree. But I also think it's important to note that many of the initiatives that we were talking about today have come from student-led request, programming, and then have been formalized by the institutions later. I also think that it's really interesting that it's been said that what the universities are doing is unconstitutional. If it's unconstitutional, I'm unclear why we need this bill to stop what's happening that is unconstitutional. So if you could respond to that, I'd like to hear your answer.
So I'd like to just take your points kind of in order. You said it's overreaching. It asks that we stop unconstitutional behavior on campus. I don't know how you do less than stop it all. So overreaching, it is simply asking that the Constitution be followed. The point that there would be liability, there is liability right now for unconstitutional. This bill doesn't open us up for liability. It shuts the door on liability. Under Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, anyone can sue for having been discriminated against on our campuses. And as of, I think, January 27th, the Federal Department of Education has opened a portal for just that, reporting discrimination on college campuses. We need to shut it down. We set up the institutions. We need to oversee the institutions. We need to instruct them when they are doing things that are outside the policy of our state and the Constitution of the United States, and that set us up for liability. So whether this bill has a private right of action or not, there is a private right of action in federal court that will be followed, I'm sure, with an open portal for reporting. We want to stop that in our state. You talked about the licensure boards having set up these metrics for licensing. If unconstitutional practices are part of what they have set up, that's not legal. It will set us up for liability. We can't allow licensure boards to make the determination that unconstitutional classes and work and anything, classes on this, are to be required. That is a liability to our state. We cannot do that. You talked about that we will have fewer and fewer students. We have had fewer and fewer students with this policy in place. You talked about this being that there will be topics off the record that we can't talk about. We can talk about anything. This bill actually protects that. No one can stop academic freedom in Kentucky. This bill specifically excludes that from the definitions of what's banned. So I appreciate your questions, but I think none of them give rise to a vote no on this bill.
I disagree.
Thank you.
Next question is from Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just need to make a statement before I ask any questions. It appears to me that this is not a hearing that wants to hear all the facts. From what I've been able to gather, the presenter and the gentleman to her right, Michael, I didn't get your last name, but they just have the run of the room, and they're going on and on and on in expressing their points. There's some people here, and some people have contacted me that have opinions as well, and they need to have the opportunity to have their information and their points of view put into record.
I agree.
In this committee. She gets away saying whatever she wants to say. She goes on.
Well,
and on
Representative
and
Brown, the more questions and comments from the members, there's going to be less time for the audience to be able to speak.
on. They're going to have less time anyway. Okay, but I just needed to make that statement, that editorial statement and comment about the running of this committee and the fact that we're here where we are. I think that, number one, history has been discriminatory without a doubt in terms of allowing people to come into our institutions in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And that is a historical fact. And that the issues surrounding this issue are certainly germane to that conversation and should be taken into consideration. And I don't know if they will be taken into consideration, and that they will be, I think a lot of minds are already made up. the historical indicators of what has occurred, particularly with people who look like me, and other protected classes in our society. It's a really serious problem, and I think we're trivializing it, and that we're trying to say that this does not matter. Affirmative action was struck down by the Supreme Court in June of 23, and there were some protections that were taken away, and that we were not able to have a say in all those things that were in the civil rights in the Civil Rights Bill and civil rights action that took place. And as I have gone over, and I've got many questions, and I'm not going to be able to get them all in, but I just have a couple of questions, and hopefully I can get these in. That one of the things that I have found in my study and research is that the House Bill 4 will increase the risk of Title VI and Title IX violations to the U.S. Constitution, and I think that's problematic, and I don't think we've taken that into consideration. And with the time that I have, I won't have. That's the only question that I will ask at this time. But I will certainly be asking the questions on the floor of you, Representative Decker. I think it's important that these things get out, and we'll have more time to address these issues on the floor if and when this comes to the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Brown. The Title VI and Title IX violations are exactly what this bill stops. It will not open us to more litigation. It will stop the risk of that. The bill is specifically to stop violations of Title VI and Title IX.
Yes, sir. And given the FAQ that was released by the U.S. Department of Education.
This gentleman is sitting here, and he's having all to say, and he can say whatever he wants to say.
Representative Brown, you asked a question and they are responding to the question. If you have an additional comment, please make it to the chair. Again, this is not to be a debate between the presenters and the members. All questions,
Speaker,
all comments need to go for the chair.
Respectfully, it is a debate because what I said he's responding to, and I don't get a chance to respond to him. So that does make it a debate.
Again, proper protocol is to go through the chair, is what I'm trying to emphasize here, Representative Brown. I will give you a brief opportunity to respond to his comment.
He hasn't finished commenting.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Frazier.
Sure. What I was going to say is that underneath the recent FAQs by the U.S. Department of Education, it's been said that DEI, particularly in the promotion of preferential and prejudicial treatment, is a violation of Title VI. And that while the bill does address these things, it does have a show of reduction to ensure that there's accountability and responsibility on campuses when racial discrimination happens. Because you're all right, there is discrimination in this world, and the universities need to account for it, not to put up veneers underneath DEI. Thank you.
Okay, our final question from the members will come from Representative Doan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the lady from Shelby for her hard work on this bill. I know you've been working on this for years, it seems like. And I also want to thank the chairman for the way he's handled this committee. I've been in a couple of these where they're controversial, and these things can turn into clown shows, and you've done a great job to hold on to this committee, Mr. Chair. My comment is just simply on the committee sub and what changed. The only thing that I don't like in this bill is that we remove that private cause of action. And what was in the original bill and still maintains is that the Attorney General would have a writ of mandamus, or the ability to force a writ of mandamus on something like this. Essentially what a writ of mandamus is, it's an ability for a more powerful government entity to kind of point their finger at a smaller government entity and tell them, you shall do this. The only issue with that is that our college universities could now ignore the provisions of this bill, and the only redress that we get is proactive redress. It is not redressing the actual issues that have occurred. And so I thank you for bringing this bill. I would like to see maybe a little more teeth to it, but I think you've done a great job on this. Thank you.
Representative Decker, if you and your colleagues would leave the table, we're not going to be able to get to everybody due to our time constraints this morning. We are at 8:45. We'll have 10 minutes. So I have quite a long list here. I'm going to go in the order that you signed up. So I would ask if Eric Russ, James Orlick and Michael Lynn would come to the table, please. I'm going to ask each of you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. To begin with, would you make sure that the green light is on, push that button and make sure your green light is on, and the microphone is pulled close to you so everyone can hear. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chair Tipton and members of the Postsecondary Education Committee for the opportunity to testify today.
Just introduce yourself for the record right now.
I'm Dr. Eric Russ.
Okay, please go ahead. Next.
James Orlick.
Okay, next. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Eric Russ, licensed psychologist and executive director of the Kentucky Psychological Association, representing over 1,000 psychology professionals and trainees, including psychology students and faculty across Kentucky's colleges and universities. I'm here today to strongly oppose HB 4. I have serious concerns about the licensure language inserted in the sub and taking away the ability of those boards to protect the public through required education. HB 4 continues to threaten our ability to recruit and retain top psychology and other healthcare researchers and trainees in Kentucky, already a difficult task. We know from decades of social and organizational psychological science that diverse, equitable, and inclusive policies and programs are critical drivers of employee and student engagement, turnover, and innovation. These programs enhance learning and health, build communities, and stimulate economic growth. Eliminating these programs and creating a chilling environment for discussions of individual differences will make it more difficult to retain and recruit faculty and graduate and undergraduate students, particularly those coming from racially diverse and LGBTQ+ backgrounds. We have seen undergraduate enrollment start to rebound after COVID, and this will reverse those gains, lead to a brain drain, and have a damaging effect on our current and future healthcare workforce. I urge you to vote no on HB 4. Thank you.
Okay, next, go ahead.
My name is James Orlick, and I'm a PhD student in educational leadership and organizational development at the University of Louisville. Somebody would have to flee the state because of this bill. For the past 18 years, I have worked in higher education, raising millions of dollars of grant funds and ensuring that higher education is a bridge to success and not a barrier. My work in equity is personal. I was raised by my grandmother in Appalachia and as a gay individual. What if the doors to your future were slammed shut not because of your abilities, but because of who you are? This is what HB 4 will do. HB 4 threatens to dismantle pathways to opportunity. While the bill makes exceptions for certain groups, it excludes African American, Latinx, Native American, Asian, LGBTQ+, women, and immigrant students, groups that have historically faced systemic barriers in both education and the workforce. The bill's ambiguous requirements, including a state-mandated ideological survey, raises concerns about data validity, academic freedom, political misuse, and substantial financial costs, costing $500,000 to $2 million plus ongoing costs for the survey. This is a policy brief that I co-authored at the Center for Economic Education that was published. HB 4 is unconstitutional. It explicitly disadvantaged protected classes, violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act by creating state-sponsored discrimination. This exclusion is unfair. My spouse is a Filipino immigrant. He does the back-breaking work that many Americans just won't do, serving in healthcare and caring for our communities. Our policies should support, not shut out, those who give back every day. We must fully commit to the success of our multiracial democracy, where the contributions of all Americans are valued. Otherwise, we risk losing a generation of talented people to the detriment of us all. I urge you to vote against HB 4. Thank you.
Go ahead, next, please.
Mr. Chair, can you make sure their microphone is on?
There you got you.
Good morning. I'm Michael Lynn. I am a master's student at the University of Kentucky studying history. And I could go on all about these other points of opposition that I have with the bill, but right now I want to speak about the effect of the language of the discriminatory concepts, particularly banning required courses that teach discriminatory concepts or research about discriminatory concepts. I research racial violence, and I lead recitations for an introductory American history class. My students can maturely talk about really tough subjects like Jim Crow, lynching. We can talk about these subjects, and they understand that that's not an indictment of their character, that that's not an indictment of them as people. But consider this example. Actually, one of the sponsors of this bill, my representative, Dan Pfister, I had the pleasure to see him at a Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast. And here's an MLK quote. "A society that has done something special against Negroes for hundreds of years must do something special for him." Is that a discriminatory concept? And how does that impact my ability to teach Martin Luther King Jr.? Can I teach that quote? Can I support or endorse any statements by Martin Luther King Jr.? And now you may be saying that it's absurd, the idea that I can't teach about that, but where is the line? We're in an age where ideas of scares about critical race theory have kind of tainted all education about race. And I'm concerned about the chilling effect that's going to be had on other educators and myself discussing race in the classroom. And for research purposes, if I can't do my research here because of the interpretation of a discriminatory concept, depending on that interpretation, I could be censored. I won't have the academic freedom, and I won't have the freedom to lead the classes in the way that I want to and discuss race and these things that we've been talking about today. And we can all talk maturely about them, but this bill assumes that that isn't possible and that educators shouldn't be at the discretion to decide what is being discussed. And I think the interpretation of that language, their discriminatory concept, that's setting a very dangerous path.
Thank you all for your presentation. We have time for one more audience member to make a presentation. I'm going to call on Will Warner. Come forward, please. Will, if you'll make sure that microphone is on and pull it up close to you, and please identify yourself for the record, and I'll give the oath.
Is that working? Good, perfect. Will Warner.
All right. Please raise your right hand.
Sir.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir. Thank
Please
you.
proceed, Will.
Chairman Tipton, thank you for having me here. You asked who I am. As you can see, I'm an old white man. I grew up in Louisville, went to Louisville Public Schools. I've always been good at math and was chosen for advanced math classes, but there were never any girls in those classes. When I asked how come, they said girls are not good at math. To my 12-year-old brain, this made sense. It was at least consistent with all the girls going to home ec classes to learn women's work, like cooking and sewing, while all the boys took shop. Then again, I was also taught that Europe was a source of modern civilization, that black people had no history, and that black kids in the West End of Louisville didn't deserve new textbooks or even musical instruments because they didn't know how to take care of them. Like both my parents and my grandparents, I went to college. I've got a BA in literature and a master's in computer science, served 5 years as a naval officer, and then spent about 30 years in various flavors of corporate America, such as Hewlett-Packard and Lexmark, including about 8 years as a manager. It would always bother me when we were in meetings trying to come to a decision or solve a problem when a woman would say something and the group would just ignore it. Then a few minutes later, a man would say the exact same thing, and that time people listened. I'm sure all the women on this committee have been in that situation. I tried to speak up to make sure the women the women I work with knew I valued them, especially the women who worked for me when I was a manager. These ways of ignoring and devaluing women create what we call a hostile environment. Women in these environments end up doubting their abilities or questioning whether their abilities will ever be valued. They often quit their jobs or leave school because they don't think they belong. I've also been in environments that are hostile to black people, people who are not Christian, excuse me, and gay people. Just as we call hostility towards women misogyny, we also have a name for the hostility towards anyone who is not straight, white, male, and Christian: white supremacy. Diversity, equity, inclusion supports people in hostile environments. Diversity, equity, inclusion programs for women do not give women an unfair advantage. They repair the damage done to women and to our institutions by misogyny. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for black people do not give black people an unfair advantage. They repair the damage done to black people and to our institutions by white supremacy. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have so far mainly benefited white women, including all the women on this committee. By creating environments that are less hostile towards women, I put myself with every man in this room as benefiting from diversity, equity, inclusion because men do not have all the answers. We need everybody's perspective. Diversity, equity, and inclusion helps us value everything that people bring into a group and recognizes that value does not just come from white men. Getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion means going back to hostility towards anybody who is not a straight white man. It means promoting white supremacy. I truly hope this is not your intention, but it is the effect. Whether or not promoting white supremacy is your intent, the open white supremacists like what you're doing. It won't be long before some chucklehead says that if he gets on an airplane and sees that the pilot is a woman, he's getting off because
Will, I
she's a
do
DEI hire.
apologize. Your 3 minutes are up.
Getting rid of diversity, equity, inclusion to improve schools makes no sense. It only makes sense if you want to go back to
Will,
when schools
thank you
were
for your
hostile.
presentation.
This
but
only
your
makes
time is
sense
up.
if you're in favor of white supremacy. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, House Bill 4, having received a proper motion, as amended by the committee sub, having received a proper motion and a second, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bratcher? Representative Brown?
No.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Doan?
Aye.
Representative Grossel?
Yes.
Representative Massaroni?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative Payne? Representative Rorks?
No.
Representative Stalker?
Absolutely not.
Representative Thompson?
Yes.
Representative Truitt?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
May I just briefly?
Please.
I'm really grateful for people who came here today to testify against this bill. I know it's going to affect a lot of people. And I feel really bad that your voices were not heard. I don't think it's the right way to conduct a democracy, but thank you for being here, and I vote no.
Chair Tipton?
Chair would like to briefly explain his yes vote. I've been listening to this issue for many years now during my service in the House of Representatives. There's been a lot of debate on both sides, and quite frankly, this debate has become a distraction to what our true goal should be, and that is student success. Student success for every student in the Commonwealth of Kentucky should have an opportunity to succeed. And we need to, and I have met with every university president so far this session, and I emphasize to them that we have to work to help every student succeed no matter their situation in life. There are many extra wraparound services that are needed, and that should be our goal. That should be what we're focused on, helping every student have the opportunity to succeed. House Bill 4 is amended by House Committee Substitute 4, having received 11 aye votes and 4 no votes, passes with favorable expression.